Hello and welcome to my channel, and welcome to a Sunday morning meetup in which I present 50 books to read before you die. This idea comes from a website called List Challenges. I will leave a link in the show notes below. The list consists of 50 classic literary works from the world's great writers. The challenge thrown out is, how many have you read? Book number 1, The Lord of the Rings Trilogy by J.R.R. Tolkien. A colleague at work about 10 or 12 years ago suggested that I read The Lord of the Rings. He raved about it and thought it was wonderful. I read some of it, but it just didn't grab me. I had to go back to my colleague and admit that I didn't really like it. I did later read The Hobbit, which I thoroughly enjoyed, but I have never read all of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Book number 2, 1984 by George Orwell. I read this seminal work many years ago. His prediction that Big Brother is watching you turned out to be frighteningly true. I also read Animal Farm, in which all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others, and I also read some of Orwell's essays. Book number 3, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This is my number 1 favourite book of all time. I need say no more about it. See my top 10 books in the info cards above. I enjoyed Northanger Abbey, Sense and Sensibility, and Emma, but I didn't enjoy Persuasion, and I couldn't finish Mansfield Park. Book number 4, The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. I owned and read Steinbeck's journals and his journal of a novel which he wrote while composing East of Eden. So I thought that Grapes of Wrath would be a natural follow-on from there. Unfortunately, I just couldn't get into this bleak novel. Book number 5, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. This is another one of my top 10 books of all time, a superb novel in every way. Book number 6, Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I've read Jane Eyre twice and it is superb except for the ending. The writing is juicy, the characters are well drawn, and the story is compelling, but I did not like the ending. I didn't enjoy Shirley, and I was exasperated by Villette with its many French passages. Book number 7, Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I thought this was a masterly work when I first read it many years ago, but I've not been able to read it again, although I keep thinking that I ought to, but I don't. Book number 8, A Passage to India by E.M. Forster. I loved the film of this book, but not the book. I did not enjoy Morris, Howards End, or Forster's collection of short stories. The book of his that I do value is Aspects of the Novel, his series of lectures on the novel. That is excellent. Book number 9, Lord of the Flies by William Golding. I've read this twice, the second time fairly recently for Adam's Book to Film Club. I do not think this book is very well written, although the premise is very intriguing. Book number 10, Hamlet by William Shakespeare. I've read and watched this play many times. It is beyond praise as a work of psychological realism of a very high order. I have read about 30 of Shakespeare's plays. Book number 11, A Bend in the River by V.S. Naipaul. I haven't read this book and I did not know what it was about. This spot, this bend in the river, is a microcosm of post-colonial Africa at the time of independence, a scene of chaos, violent change, warring tribes, ignorance, isolation and poverty. Book number 12, The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I have read this, but at the risk of offending my US viewers, I'm going to have to confess that I thought it was overhyped and underwhelming. Book number 13, The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. Hated this Marmite book. Holden Caulfield as the obnoxious, foul-mouthed teenager in the all-time classic coming-of-age story is a character I can live without. Book number 14, The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I have never been drawn to Sylvia Plath. I know that she was a suicide, and it has just prejudiced me against her. I know it shouldn't, but it does. The novel sounds pretty bleak and is a reflection of Plath's own seriously impaired mental condition. No, this is not for me. Book number 15, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. I thought this was a masterpiece of speculative fiction when I first read it. Through clever use of genetic engineering, brainwashing and recreational sex and drugs, the world controllers have created the ideal society where all its members are happy consumers. Or are they? Book number 16, The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. In July 1942, 13-year-old Anne Frank and her family, fleeing the occupation, went into hiding in an Amsterdam warehouse. Over the next 2 years, Anne vividly describes in her diary the frustrations of living in such close quarters and her thoughts, feelings and longings as she grows up. Her diary ends abruptly when, in August 1944, they were all betrayed. I read this book probably 50 years ago now, but I've never forgotten this deeply moving and unforgettable portrait of an ordinary teenage girl facing extraordinary circumstances. Book number 17, Don Quixote by Miguel de Cervantes. I've read part 1 of this work and have tried on numerous occasions since to read it again and to read part 2, but I always get bogged down in this slow, torturous, digressive work. The most recent time I looked into this work, I found it troubling. The idea of poking fun at an elderly, befuddled man seemed to jar with my modern sensibilities. Book number 18, The Bible. This collection of books written by 40 authors over a span of 2,000 years is both a literary masterpiece and a fountain of wisdom and grace. It is without doubt the world's most influential book. I read it for what it is, the Word of God to a fallen race. Book number 19, The Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer. I have wanted to read the Canterbury Tales, have read parts of it, and recently bought a beautiful illustrated modern edition, but have still not read it. Book number 20, Ulysses by James Joyce. I've read this book twice. The first time I was in my late 20s and I read it together with a guide book over a period of 6 months. I was obviously so impressed with my first reading that I decided about 30 years later to read it again. That was enough. I have read The Portraits of an Artist as a young man, The Dubliners, and attempted to read the unreadable Finnegan's Wake. Book number 21, The Quiet American by Graham Greene. I have not read this one by Graham Greene. I have read A Burnt Out Case a couple of times, and I own Brighton Rock and The Heart of the Matter, but have still not read them. Book number 22, Birdsong by Sebastian Faulks. I read some of this book, but I didn't like it. Not sure why. May have been the writing, because the subject matter about love and war is one that interests me. I read Girl at the Lion d'Or, which I quite enjoyed. Book number 23, Money by Martin Amis. Martin Amis is just not my cup of tea. I prefer Dad, even if Lucky Jim is dated now. Although for some reason that escapes me, I did read Martin Amis's memoir called Experience. I remember he complained a lot about his teeth. Book number 24, Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling. I am too old for this nonsense. Book number 25, Moby Dick by Herman Melville. I read it about 25 years ago. Yes, every single bit of blubber. Steve recently tried to seduce me into reading it again for his read-along. I took it out of the library, read a chapter or two, and gave up. I have read Billy Budd, Bartleby the Scrivener, and Benito Cereno, all of which I enjoyed. Book number 26, The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. I own a copy of this and have read bits of it, but have never settled down to read it all. Don't know why. Book number 27, his Dark Materials series by Philip Pullman. I bought this set, read a bit of the first book, and then sold it on eBay. Book number 28, Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. Hailed as the greatest novel of all time. I tried reading it and couldn't get into it and gave up. I'm going to try reading this book again in July when my booktuber friend David Murphy hosts a read-along of the novel. I've only read book 1 of War and Peace and still plan to read it all one day. Book number 29, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. Of course, I have read this book, as well as Through the Looking Glass. Inspired by James Joyce, I wrote a pastiche of the Alice books. Book number 30, Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I read this and quite enjoyed it. A couple of years ago I tried reading The King's General and was bored witless. Book number 31, The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Night-Time by Mark Haddon. Yes, and very clever and witty it is too. Book number 32, On the Road by Jack Kerouac. No, I've never travelled on Jack's Road and have no intention of ever doing so. Book number 33, Heart of Darkness by Josie Conrad. Yes, but not all that keen. I've read Nostromo but didn't think much of it, and I own Lord Jim but have never bothered to read it. Conrad is not an author I've ever been attracted to. Book number 34, The Way We Live Now by Anthony Trollope. This is a superb work by a master of the novel. I have read about 15 of Trollope's novels and intend reading more. Book number 35, The Stranger, aka The Outsider by Albert Camus. I thought this was excellent. Book number 36, The Colour Purple by Alice Walker. I didn't really know anything about this book. I looked at the first chapter and I don't think it's for me. Book number 37, Life of Pi by Jan Martel. Doesn't sound like my kind of book at all. Book number 38, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This is an extraordinary work for a young girl to write. It has proved to be a cultural phenomenon. Knowledge is knowing that Frankenstein is not the monster. Wisdom is knowing that Frankenstein is the monster. Book number 39, The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. I own a huge collection of novels by H.G. Wells, some of which I have read and some I have yet to read. I know the story of The War of the Worlds, which was famously adapted as a radio play by Orson Welles, which scared America half to death when they first heard it, thinking it was a news program. So I'm not sure if I've read it or not, but I will. Book number 40, Men Without Women by Ernest Hemingway. I don't know anything about this book. I have never warmed to Hemingway or to his style as a writer. The following description of the stories of Hemingway's from Amazon does nothing to attract me to him or to his subject matter. Hemingway's men are bullfighters and boxers, hard hands and hard drinkers, gangsters and gunmen. Each of their story deals with masculine toughness unsoftened by woman's hand, incisive, hard-edged, pared down to the bare minimum. I own a biography called Papa Hemingway by E. Hutchner, but I haven't read it. Book number 41, Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. I have read this and, of course, seen numerous adaptations in film. Not a book I would be interested in reading again. Book number 42, A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. I've read most of Charles Dickens' novels. I've read A Christmas Carol several times and have seen several film adaptations which I have enjoyed. Book number 43, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. I read this book many years ago and read it again quite recently. I didn't enjoy it very much the second time around. I much prefer The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. Book number 44, Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. I've read this book at least twice and have seen several film adaptations. There is something quite compulsive about the situation of being stranded on a deserted island which grips the imagination. See my Desert Island top 10 novels in the info cards above. Book number 45, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey. Seeing Jack Nicholson with that devilish look on his face has always put me off this book, but the book's premise is also not one that attracts me. Book number 46, Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. Intense curiosity, of which I have an enormous quantity, compelled me to read this book. I can't remember if I'd seen the film first or if I read the book first. Either way, it was clever in parts, but overall I did not rate it highly at all. Book number 47, The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. I've read this book twice and have seen several film adaptations, all of which I've enjoyed. The false arrest and imprisonment of Dantes for 18 years in the Chateau d'If is heartbreaking, and his transformation into the Count of Monte Cristo and his plot to obtain revenge make for compelling reading. I've also read The Three Musketeers, which is also a great book and worth reading. Book number 48, Memoirs of a Geisha by Arthur Golden. Who would have thought that I would have been interested in the life of a geisha? But Golden engages our attention with this beautifully written and compelling story. It is an absolute delight. Book number 49, The Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri. I've dipped into this work and have meant to read it on several occasions. I have a beautiful but lurid version illustrated by Gustave Doré. But what has stopped me reading it thus far is the fact that it is doctrinally unsound, with its visions of hell, and is essentially a blasphemous slander on God's loving character. This book has had a profoundly adverse effect on the perception of who and what God is. I don't need to read the whole text, as Dorian has expressed through his lurid illustrations what Dante intends to convey: that God will be torturing hapless human beings in grotesque and cruel ways because of their sins. This idea turns God, who is a loving father, into a depraved monster who metes out cruel and unusual punishment. If you truly knew who and what God is, you would not think like this. Book number 50, The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. When I was younger, I had an Oscar Wilde phase and tried to read everything by him. He's an unequal writer, but his plays are scintillating displays of his remarkable wit, and in The Picture of Dorian Gray he hit upon a theme that has captured the imagination of millions. In sparkling prose that, it has to be admitted, is decadent in keeping with his character, he created an unconventional young man who never ages, in spite of the many sins he deliberately commits. Dorian Gray's picture displays instead the results of his decadent and sinful lifestyle. In my forthcoming Wednesday interlude, I will be shining the spotlight on Jean Plaidy, the historical novelist. So join me then if you want to discover some fascinating information about Jean Plaidy. So that's all, folks, but I'll be back soon with another BookTube video.